6 months ago, Violet Montgomery had an impossible dream: to have a perfect first dance at her Sweet 16 party. The problem wasn't the money. Her mother, Olivia Montgomery, was a millionaire, owning 15 high-end clothing boutiques across the United States. The problem was, Violet was born without arms, and 4 professional designers, after charging thousands of dollars, told her mother the same thing: impossible. Today, I'm going to tell you how a housekeeper, with just a few $1,000s from her own paycheck and a sewing machine from 1972, did what no designer with a college degree could. But before we continue, I need you to understand something. This story isn't about a dress. It's about what happens when someone decides that someone else's dream is worth more than their own comfort. If you've ever felt like the world was telling you, no, stick around, because what comes next will change how you see the people who clean your home. Violet was born on March 3rd, 2010, at New York Presbyterian Hospital. Her mother, Olivia Montgomery, was 33 years old. She was a regional manager for a chain of upscale clothing stores. She worked 14 hours a day, traveled 3 weeks out of every month, and made more money than she could spend. When the doctors told her that her daughter had been born with a condition called congenital bilateral amelia, Olivia didn't understand. They explained it in simpler terms. Her daughter had no arms, no forearm, no hands, just 2 small stumps where her shoulders should begin. Olivia cried for 3 days straight. Then she stopped crying and started working even harder. She hired the best nannies, the best occupational therapists, the best private tutors. She compensated for her absence with money, and money, admittedly, worked for many things. Violet learned to write with her feet at the age of 4. By 6, she mastered the computer, using her toes with a speed that put her classmates to shame. At 8, she won her first gold medal in junior Paralympic swimming. At 10, she was painting oil paintings that sold in art galleries. Violet wasn't a disabled child. She was a child with a different ability, who had turned every limitation into an opportunity. But there was something that Olivia's money couldn't buy, something that all the therapists in the world couldn't teach, something that Violet wanted more than any medal or any painting sold. She wanted to have a perfect first dance at her Sweet 16 party. It seems like a small dream. It seems insignificant compared to swimming or painting. But for Violet, it wasn't, because she had seen her friends dance at their Sweet 16s. She had seen how their fathers held them around the waist, how they twirled in their enormous dresses, how the world stopped for 4 minutes while the music enveloped them. And she wanted that. She wanted to feel the world stop for her. She wanted to wear a huge dress. She wanted to spin until she was dizzy. She wanted her father, even though he was divorced from her mother, to hold her while they danced. The problem was the dress. Traditional Sweet 16 dresses have a specific structure. They need straps, sleeves, something to hold them up on the upper body. Without arms, without developed shoulders, without the muscular structure that allows a dress to stay in place, it was technically impossible to create a dress that wouldn't fall off while Violet danced. Olivia contacted 4 designers. The first charged $800 for 3 meetings and a sketch that would never work. The second charged $1,500 and suggested that Violet wear cosmetic prosthetics under the dress. Violet refused. She wanted to dance as she was, not disguised as something she wasn't. The third designer charged $1,200 and proposed a dress with a rigid structure, almost like a metal corset, that stood on its own but didn't allow movement. Violet couldn't twirl. She couldn't dance. She could only stand like a statue. The fourth designer was the most expensive, $1,500, 3 months of work, a prototype that fell apart the first time Violet tried to do a full turn, $5,000 spent, 4 professionals with years of experience, 0 results. Olivia was desperate. and Violet, for the first time in 14 years, had stopped believing that everything was possible. One night in February, 3 months before the scheduled Sweet 16 party, Violet locked herself in her room. She didn't come out for dinner. She didn't answer messages. Olivia was on a business trip in Seattle. The only person in the house was Gladys Hawthorne, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for 3 years. Gladys was 52 years old. She was a widow. She came from Appalachia. Before working cleaning houses, she had been a seamstress for 25 years in a dress shop in New York City. The shop closed during the pandemic. Gladys lost her job, her savings, and had to start over at 49. No one in the Montgomery house knew this. For Olivia, Gladys was just the cleaning lady. For Violet, she was the lady who sometimes made her breakfast when the nannies didn't arrive on time. No one had ever asked her story. No one knew that she kept a Singer sewing machine from 1972 in her small apartment in Queens. No one knew that she still sewed dresses for free for underprivileged girls in her free time. And no one knew that Gladys had had a daughter. Her name was Lizzie. She had cerebral palsy. She died at 12 years old, a decade ago, from respiratory complications. Before she died, Gladys had sewn her an adapted communion dress, a dress that didn't require Lizzie to be able to move her arms, a dress that was held up by a system of invisible harnesses that Gladys had invented after months of trial and error. That night in February, Gladys went up to drop off clean laundry in Violet's room. She heard the crying before she knocked. She knocked softly. There was no answer. She knocked again. "Honey, I'm just going to leave your clothes out here." There was no answer. Just more crying. Gladys could have left. That was her job. Clean. Leave the clothes. Leave. She wasn't paid to comfort her employer's daughter. She wasn't paid to ask what was wrong. She wasn't paid to get involved. But Gladys heard that crying and remembered another crying. A crying from 10 years ago. A crying from a girl who also believed that there were things she could never do. "Sweetheart, it's Gladys. If you want to talk, I'm here." 30 seconds passed. Then the door opened. Lizzie was sitting on her bedroom floor, surrounded by dress sketches, photographs of her friends' Sweet 16 parties, and a laptop open to videos of first dances. Her eyes were red, her cheeks were wet, and she wore an expression that Gladys immediately recognized. It was the expression of someone who had stopped believing in what was possible. "They're not going to make the dress," Lizzie said without looking at her. "No one knows how." Gladys said nothing. She sat down on the floor next to Lizzie. She looked at the sketches. She looked at the photographs. She looked at the videos. And then she saw something that no designer had seen. She saw that Lizzie didn't want a normal dress with modifications. Lizzie wanted a dress that hugged her, a dress that moved with her, a dress that didn't try to hide what she lacked, but celebrated what she had. Gladys closed her eyes. She remembered Lizzie's Sweet 16 dress. She remembered the 12 anchor points. She remembered how the invisible harness distributed the weight. She remembered how her daughter had twirled, just once, on the day of her first communion, with a smile she still saw when she closed her eyes. "Honey," Gladys said, opening her eyes, "what's your favorite song for the first dance?" Lizzie looked at her, confused. It was the first time anyone had asked her about the song instead of asking about the problem. "A Time for Dancing," Lizzie replied, "by one of the greats. Let me find his name." Gladys nodded. She stood up. She picked up one of the rejected sketches. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she flipped it over and started drawing something on the back. Lizzie watched, uncomprehendingly. Gladys was drawing lines, points, arrows. It didn't look like a dress. It looked like an engineering diagram. "What's that?" Lizzie asked. "It's a harness," Gladys replied, without stopping drawing. "Invisible. It goes inside the dress. It anchors at 12 points on your back and your shoulders. It distributes the weight, so the dress doesn't depend on straps or sleeves. You can twirl, you can dance, you can move. Lizzie moved closer to the drawing. Her eyes widened. You know how to make dresses. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Gladys stopped drawing. She looked at her directly. I was a seamstress for 25 years. I made sweet 16 dresses for hundreds of girls. And 10 years ago, I made a special dress for my daughter. She couldn't wear normal dresses either. Gladys said no more. It wasn't necessary. Lizzie understood. Why didn't you ever say anything? Lizzie asked. To my mum, to the designers, why didn't you say you knew? Gladys smiled sadly. Because no one asked, sweetheart. No one asks the cleaning lady. That night, something changed. Not in the house. Not in Gladys's job. It changed in a small room of a girl without arms who suddenly had hope. But there was a huge problem. Olivia knew nothing. The designers had officially failed. The Sweet 16 party was scheduled for May. It was February. There were 3 months left, and Gladys couldn't just show up saying she could make the dress. She was the housekeeper. She had no credentials, no degree. She had nothing to prove she knew what she was doing, except an old sewing machine and memories from a decade ago. So Gladys made a decision. She would do it in secret. She would work at home, at night, after her cleaning shifts. She would buy the fabric with her own money. She would build the dress piece by piece. And when it was finished and when it was perfect, when there was no doubt that it worked, then she would show it. Lizzie agreed. It was a risky plan. If Olivia found out that her housekeeper was doing something behind her back with her daughter, she would probably fire her. But for Lizzie, the risk was worth it. Because for the first time in months, someone had told her that she would dance at her Sweet 16 party. And she had said it with the eyes of someone who had done exactly that before. The next day, Gladys began her research. She visited 4 orthopedic stores in New York City. She studied medical harnesses. She took notes. She drew modifications. She spoke with technicians who made prosthetics. She asked about materials that were strong but flexible, invisible but resilient. She spent the entire first month just researching. She didn't buy a single yard of fabric. She didn't cut a single piece. She just researched, designed, calculated in her blue notebook, the same kind of notebook she used for cleaning lists. She started to document everything. Day 1, visited Orthopedics R Us. Day 2, got samples of elastic fabric. Day 3, practiced anchor points on a borrowed mannequin, 47 different sketches, 12 miniature harness prototypes, 3 visits to fabric stores in the garment district where no one asked why a cleaning lady was buying French organza. The second month, Gladys started sewing. She worked from 6 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon at the Montgomery's house. Then she took 2 buses and a subway to get to her apartment in the Bronx. She ate something quick, and from 5 in the afternoon to midnight, she sewed 7 hours a day, 7 days a week. Her 1972 Singer machine, inherited from her grandmother, made a noise that her neighbors already knew. When they heard that noise, they knew that Gladys was doing something important. They didn't know what. They didn't ask. They just knew that that machine only worked when there was a dream involved. The dress took shape, slowly. It was pink. Not just any pink. It was the exact pink that Lizzie had pointed out in a magazine photograph. Gladys had searched in 9 different stores until she found the exact shade. The skirt was full, with layers of tulle that allowed movement. The bodice was structured but flexible, reinforced with plastic boning instead of metal to reduce weight. And inside, invisible from the outside, was the harness. 12 anchor points distributed on Lizzie's back and shoulders. Each point was covered by a medical-grade silicone pad to prevent irritation. The straps were made of an elastic material used in high-performance sports equipment. They adjusted with silent Velcro and hid completely under the fabric. The result was a dress that seemed to float, a dress that defied gravity, a dress that didn't need arms to hold it up. But Gladys wasn't satisfied. "A dress that just stays up isn't enough," she told Lizzie in one of their secret conversations. "A sweet 16 dress has to dance with you. It has to twirl when you twirl. It has to fly when you fly." Then she began the second phase, the movement tests. Once a week, always when Olivia was traveling, Gladys brought the dress to the Montgomery's house hidden in a laundry bag. Violet was trying it on in her room and practicing. "Turn to the right, faster, now to the left, lift your shoulders, lower them, walk forward, now backward." Each fitting revealed a problem. Each problem demanded a solution. Each solution meant more late nights working for Gladys. By the third month, 6 weeks before the Sweet 16 party, the dress was almost finished. And then came the day that would change everything. Olivia Montgomery had a flight scheduled to Atlanta for a business meeting. The flight was leaving at 7 in the morning. The meeting was at 11. She would return the next day. But that morning, something happened. A thunderstorm canceled all flights from the airport. Olivia tried to reschedule. There were no options until the next day. The meeting was postponed. At 9 in the morning, Olivia was back at her house. She hadn't given anyone notice. She hadn't called. She simply arrived. The house was silent. Violet should have been at school, but had asked to stay home, complaining of a stomachache. Gladys should have been cleaning, but wasn't in any of the main rooms. Olivia went upstairs. The hallway was silent, but there was a light on at the end of the hall, a light coming from the sewing room. The sewing room was a space that Olivia never used. She had furnished it years ago, when she thought she'd have time for hobbies. She never did. The room had been closed for years, collecting dust, forgotten. But now there was light, and there was sound, a mechanical, rhythmic sound that Olivia didn't immediately recognize. It was the sound of a sewing machine. Olivia walked slowly towards the door. It was ajar. She could see shadows moving inside. She could hear voices, an adult voice and a young voice. And then Olivia pushed the door open. What she saw left her paralyzed. In the center of the room, surrounded by fabrics, threads, and sewing tools, was Gladys, her housekeeper, the woman who had cleaned her house for 3 years. She was sitting in front of an antique sewing machine, the oldest Olivia had ever seen, adjusting something on a mannequin, and on the mannequin was a dress, a pink dress, a Sweet 16 dress, a dress that was, without a doubt, the most beautiful dress Olivia had seen in her entire career in the fashion industry. But that wasn't what paralyzed Olivia. What paralyzed her was seeing Violet. Her daughter was standing next to the mannequin, wearing an unfinished version of the dress. The dress stood perfectly on her body without arms. There were no visible straps, no sleeves, none of the structures that the designers had said were absolutely necessary. The dress simply was there, embracing Violet, holding her, moving with her as she took small test steps. And Violet was crying. But it wasn't the crying of February. It wasn't the crying of defeat. It was the crying of someone who had just discovered that the impossible was possible. Gladys was the first to see Olivia. Her eyes widened in terror. She dropped the fabric she was holding. She stood up so fast that she almost knocked over the chair. "Mrs. Montgomery, I can explain." But Olivia wasn't listening. She was looking at the dress. She was looking at her daughter. She was looking at the tears of joy on Violet's face. 4 professional designers had failed. $50,000 spent, months of frustration. And here, in a forgotten room of her own house, her housekeeper had created what none of them could. Olivia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't anger. It wasn't surprise. It was something deeper. It was shame. Shame for not having asked. Shame for not having seen. Shame for having assumed that a woman who cleaned houses couldn't also be an artist. "How long?" Olivia whispered. Gladys didn't understand the question. "How long have you been working on this?" Gladys lowered her gaze. 127 days, Mrs. Montgomery." Olivia closed her eyes. 127 days. More than 4 months. 4 months of secret work. 4 months of sleepless nights. 4 months of a woman who earned $2,000 a month, spending $500 of her own money on fabrics for the dress of a girl who wasn't even her own. "Why?" Olivia asked. "Why did you do this?" Gladys didn't answer immediately. She looked at Violet. She looked at the dress. She looked at her own hands, wrinkled by years of work, stained with pink thread. "Because I also had a daughter, Mrs. Montgomery. Her name was Lizzie. She had cerebral palsy. She died 10 years ago. She was never able to dance at her sweet 16. But when she was 11 years old, I made her a first communion dress, a dress that didn't need her to be able to move her arms, a dress that embraced her." Gladys paused, her eyes filled with tears. "When I saw Violet crying that night, I saw my Lizzie. I saw another girl with a dream that everyone said was impossible, and I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Not this time, not again." Silence filled the room. Olivia looked at Gladys. She looked at the woman who had cleaned her house for 3 years, the woman whose story she had never asked about, the woman who had lost a daughter and found another in hers, and then Olivia did something she had never done in 3 years. She walked towards Gladys and hugged her. It wasn't a formal hug. It wasn't a hug from employer to employee. It was the hug of one mother to another mother. The hug of someone who finally understood what unconditional love meant. "Thank you," Olivia whispered. "Thank you for seeing my daughter and when I couldn't." Gladys cried. Violet cried. Olivia cried. 3 women in a forgotten sewing room, 3 different stories, united by a pink dress and a dream that was no longer impossible. The day of the Sweet 16 party arrived on May 15th. 200 guests filled the most elegant event hall in Atlanta. There were flowers on every table. There was an orchestra of 14 musicians. There were professional photographers capturing every moment, but none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was Violet. At exactly 8 o'clock in the evening, the lights in the hall dimmed. The murmurs subsided. All eyes turned towards the main staircase. And then Violet appeared. The dress was pink, the exact pink of the magazine photograph. The skirt was wide, with layers of tulle that looked like clouds. The bodice sparkled with tiny crystals. The Gladys had sewn on one by one over the past 3 weeks. But what made 200 people hold their breath wasn't the color or the sparkle. It was that the dress floated. There were no straps, no sleeves. There was no visible explanation of how this dress was staying on the young woman's body. A young woman without arms. It was simply there, perfect, impossible, real. Violet walked down the stairs slowly. Each step measured, practiced, perfect. The dress moved with her, as if it were part of her skin. At the foot of the stairs, waiting for her, was her father. Ricardo Montgomery had divorced Olivia when Violet was 6 years old. He hadn't been a present father. He'd paid child support and fulfilled his legal obligations, but he hadn't been there for the important moments. But tonight was different. Tonight, he'd come all the way from Cancun, where he lived with his new family. Tonight, he was here to dance with his daughter. Ricardo took Violet's invisible hand. She smiled. He smiled. And then the music began. Time for the first dance. Cheyenne, the song that Violet had chosen 4 months ago, on a night of tears and hopelessness. The opening chords filled the hall. Ricardo put his hand on Violet's waist, right where the invisible harness distributed the weight of the dress. Violet leaned into him, resting against his chest. And they began to dance. It wasn't a perfect first dance. It wasn't a competition-worthy first dance. It was something better. It was a first dance of love. Violet twirled. The dress moved with her. The layers of tulle swirled in circles. The crystals caught the light and created constellations on the ceiling of the ballroom. And Violet laughed. She laughed as she hadn't laughed in months. She laughed because she was dancing. She laughed because the impossible had become possible. She laughed because a housekeeper had given her what 4 designers couldn't. The first dance lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes of spinning. 4 minutes of music. 4 minutes of a father rediscovering his daughter. 4 minutes of 200 people holding back tears. When the last note sounded, the ballroom erupted in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was a standing ovation. There were shouts. There were tears that no one was trying to hold back anymore. And in the midst of all that noise, Violet did something that no one expected. She walked to the DJ's microphone. She asked for silence with a nod of her head, and when the room fell silent, she spoke. 6 months ago, 4 designers told me it was impossible, that a dress couldn't be made for someone like me, that I would never dance my first dance. She paused. She searched the crowd with her eyes. But there was one person who disagreed, a person who works in our house, a person that no one sees, but sees everything, a person who spent her own salary, slept 3 hours a night for 4 months, and made me the most beautiful dress in the world. Violet found Gladys at the staff table in the back of the hall. Gladys was crying. "Gladys," Violet said, using the affectionate nickname she had started using in recent months. "Come here." Gladys didn't move. She was paralyzed, but the people around her gently pushed her forward, and when she reached Violet, the 200 people in the room applauded again. This time, the applause was for her. Violet took the microphone again. 4 designers said impossible. A housekeeper said you will dance. Today I dance, thanks to her. The silence that followed was sacred. And then Olivia Montgomery stood up from her table. She walked toward Gladys, and in front of 200 guests, she made an announcement. "Gladys Hawthorne no longer works as a housekeeper in my home. As of today, she's the director of design for a new foundation that I am creating. It's called the Limitless Gowns Foundation, and its mission is to do exactly what she did for my daughter, create adapted Sweet 16 dresses for girls with disabilities who cannot afford professional designers." The ballroom exploded again. That night, Violet danced 3 more first dances, one with her grandfather, one with her best friend, in a modified version where they both twirled together, and one, the last one, with Gladys. It was a short dance, only 2 minutes. Gladys didn't know how to dance formally, but in those 2 minutes, 2 women who had found each other in the darkness of a tearful night danced together under the lights of a Sweet 16 party. When it ended, Violet whispered something in Gladys's ear. "Thank you for giving me back my dream." "Mom, Gladys." Gladys cried the rest of the night, but they were the happiest tears of her life. 3 years have passed since that Sweet 16 party. Violet is 17 now. She studies fashion design at New York University. She's the only student without arms in the history of the program. She designs with her feet, just like she wrote and painted as a child. Her thesis project is a complete line of adaptive clothing for people with upper limb disabilities. The professors say her work is revolutionary. The students say it's inspiring. But Violet just says that she's following in the footsteps of her teacher. Gladys is 55 now. She no longer cleans houses. She's the director of design for the Limitless Gowns Foundation, with a salary 5 times higher than what she earned as a housekeeper in 3 years. The foundation has created 517 adapted dresses for girls with different disabilities across the country. Each dress is designed personally by Gladys. Each dress uses some version of the invisible harness that she invented 15 years ago for her daughter Lizzie. Each dress allows a girl to dance at her sweet 16 when everyone told her it was impossible. Violet's original dress is now in the Museum of Inclusive Design in New York City. Next to it is a plaque that reads, "Designed by Gladys Hawthorne, seamstress, mother, visionary." Olivia Montgomery reduced her work hours from 14 to 8 per day. She hired a co-CEO to manage the daily operations of her boutiques. She spends her afternoons with Violet, something she hadn't done since her daughter was a baby. The foundation has received donations of over $2 million. Companies across the country sponsor individual dresses. Universities send design students to learn Gladys's techniques. The government has recognized the program as an example of social inclusion. But what's most impactful isn't the numbers or the awards. What's most impactful are the letters. Every week, at least 5 letters arrive at the foundation. Letters from girls who danced their sweet 16 thanks to a dress by Gladys. Letters from mothers who watched their daughters twirl when the doctors said they never would. Letters from families who found hope where there was only despair. One letter in particular arrived about 6 months ago. It was from a 13-year-old girl in Appalachia who was born without an arm. Her mother was a housekeeper. They didn't have money for professional designers. They didn't even have money for a big party. But the foundation sent them a dress, a pink dress just like Violet's. A dress with a harness adapted to her specific body. A dress that would allow her to dance. The girl wrote, "I used to think that people like me couldn't have normal sweet 16 parties. Now I know there's no such thing as normal. There are just people who find ways to do what others say is impossible." Gladys framed that letter. It hangs in her office, next to a photo of Lizzie and a photo of Violet. 2 daughters, one biological, who left too soon, one from the heart, who arrived when she needed her most. There's one last thing that you need to know. On the day Violet turned 18, Gladys gave her something special. It was an old wooden box with the initials LH engraved on the lid. Inside was a small dress, a white First Communion dress, a dress with an invisible harness system. That was the ancestor of Violet's pink Sweet 16 dress. It was Lizzie's dress. Violet looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at Gladys. "I want you to donate it to the foundation," Gladys said, her voice breaking. "I want it to be next to your dress in the museum. I want the world to know that miracles don't start from nothing. They start from other stories, other pains, other loves." Violet nodded, but before closing the box, she took out something else that was hidden beneath the dress. It was a photograph. In the photograph, an 11-year-old girl with cerebral palsy was smiling at the camera. She was wearing the white dress. She was sitting in a wheelchair, decorated with flowers, and beside her, a younger Gladys was hugging her with all the love in the world. "This is Lizzie," Violet said. "The girl I never met, but who taught me to dance." Gladys wept, but this time, the tears were different. They weren't tears of loss. They were tears of legacy, tears of knowing that a mother's love for a daughter never dies. It just finds new ways to manifest itself. And now, before we end, I want to ask you a question. In your life, there are people who clean your house, who work at your store, who drive your cab, who prepare your food, people you see every day but never really look at, people who have stories, talents, pains, and dreams that you'll never know because you never ask. How many of those people could do the impossible if someone gave them the chance? How many Gladys Hawthornes are there in your world, waiting for someone to see beyond the uniform? How many dreams are dying because we assume that certain people can't achieve them? I don't have the answers, but I know something for certain. Somewhere in America, tonight, there's a girl crying because she believes her dream is impossible. And somewhere near her, there's a woman with working hands and a huge heart who could make that dream come true. The question is, will someone give them the opportunity to meet? 4 designers said, impossible. A housekeeper said, you will dance. Sometimes miracles don't come from the experts. They come from the people that no one sees, but who see everything. And when Violet dances now, at any event anywhere, she always dedicates the first spin to 2 people, to Lizzie, the girl she never met, but whose dress taught her to fly, and to Mama Gladys, the woman who cleaned houses, but who sewed dreams. Because in the end, that's what Gladys did. She didn't sew a dress, she sewed a dream. Stitch by stitch, night after night, tear by tear. And that dream now lives in 517 girls all over America. 517 girls who dance because a woman with a 1972 sewing machine told them the same words. She told Violet that February night, you'll dance at your sweet 16, honey, I promise you. And mothers' promises, even if they aren't by blood, are kept. They're always kept. But there's something else you need to know, something that happened just 2 months ago, and that proves that this story is still being written. The Dresses Without Limits Foundation received a call from a hospital in the Mississippi Delta, the same state where Gladys was born more than half a century ago. The director of pediatric oncology had a special request. There was a 13-year-old girl named Marisol. She was undergoing treatment for leukemia. She had lost all her hair, she had lost a lot of weight, and she had lost, according to her mother, the hope of living. But Marisol had a dream. The same dream that Violet had had, the same dream that Lizzie had had. She wanted to dance her sweet 16. The problem was that Marisol didn't know if she would live to be 16. The doctor gave the family an option. They could wait until she turned 16, if she made it, or they could celebrate now, at 13, an early sweet 16, a celebration of life while she still had it. The family didn't have any money. The treatment had consumed all their savings. They didn't have money for a dress. They didn't have money for a party. They barely had enough for transportation to the hospital. But someone at the hospital had heard about the Dresses Without Limits Foundation. Someone had seen a news report on television about a woman who made dresses for girls who couldn't wear normal dresses. The hospital director called the foundation. He explained the situation. He asked if there was any possibility of helping. Gladys listened to the story in silence. When the director finished speaking, she only asked one question. What's Marisol's favorite song for the first dance? The doctor didn't know the answer, but he promised to find out. The next day, the doctor called again. The song was Free by a country artist named Leanne Rimes, a song about freedom, a song that Marisol had heard in the hospital, and that, according to her, made her feel like she could still fly. Gladys hung up the phone. She looked at Violet, who now worked with her at the foundation as an assistant designer, and she said something that would change the next 30 days of their lives. We're going to the Mississippi Delta, honey. We're going to make a girl fly. 30 days. That was all the time they had. Gladys and Violet traveled to the Mississippi Delta with 3 suitcases. One had sewing tools, another had fabrics of every color that Marisol could imagine, and the third had something that no professional designers would have thought to bring. It had photographs of Lizzie in her first communion dress, pictures of Violet dancing her first dance, pictures of the 517 girls who had received dresses from the foundation in the last 3 years. Gladys knew something the doctors didn't. She knew that sometimes, to heal the body, you first have to heal the soul, and Marisol's soul needed to see that she wasn't alone, that there were other girls who had faced the impossible, that there was hope beyond treatment. The first day in Appalachia, Gladys didn't touch a needle. She just talked to Marisol. She told her about Lizzie. She told her about the cerebral palsy. She told her about the white communion dress. She told her about the day Lizzie twirled just once and smiled as if the whole world belonged to her. And she told her about the day Lizzie died. It wasn't an easy conversation. It wasn't a conversation a normal designer would have with a client. But Gladys wasn't a normal designer. Gladys was a mother who had lost a daughter, and she knew that Marisol, deep down, was afraid her mother would lose her too. Marisol cried as she listened to Lizzie's story, but after crying, she did something she hadn't done in weeks, according to her mother. She smiled and asked what color her dress would be. Marisol's dress was unlike any other they'd made before. It wasn't pink like Violet's. Marisol had chosen a color Gladys had never used before. Yellow. Yellow like the sun. Yellow like hope. Yellow like the life Marisol still had and was determined to celebrate. The bodice had to be special. Marisol had a catheter in her chest for chemotherapy. The dress had to hide it, but also allow access in case of an emergency. Gladys spent 3 nights designing a system of removable panels that looked completely normal, but could open in seconds if the doctors needed them. The skirt was also special. Marisol was weak. She couldn't carry much weight. Gladys used an ultralight tool she had found at a specialty ballet supply shop. The entire dress weighed less than 4 pounds. A girl exhausted by chemo could wear it without feeling like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. But the most special detail was hidden inside the dress. Gladys had embroidered with golden thread that was only visible when the dress moved in a certain way the words Marisol most needed to hear: "You are alive, you are dancing, you are flying." The day of Marisol's early Sweet 16 party arrived on a Saturday in October. It wasn't in a fancy ballroom. It was in the hospital garden, transformed by volunteers into a little paradise. There weren't 200 guests. There were 47. The doctors, nurses, other patients, close family, and a small group of people Marisol had never met, but who had traveled from New York City just to be there. Violet was among them, Olivia too, and Gladys, of course, was in the front row. When Marisol came down the hospital steps in her yellow dress, something happened that no one expected. The other children from the oncology ward, those who were too sick to attend the party, had found a way to watch. They were peering out of the third-floor windows, some in wheelchairs, some supported by nurses, some with oxygen masks. And when they saw Marisol dancing, they started to clap. The sound of those claps, weak, irregular, full of desperate hope, filled the garden like a symphony. Marisol's first dance lasted 3 minutes and 40 seconds. She danced it with her father, a carpenter who worked 12 hours a day to pay for his daughter's treatment. The father cried throughout the dance, but he didn't let go of his daughter for a second. And when they finished dancing, Marisol did something no one will ever forget. She looked up at the third-floor windows, at the sick children watching her, at the children who would probably never have their own Sweet 16 party, and she blew them a kiss, a yellow kiss like her dress, a kiss that said, "If I can dance, you can too. If I can live, you can too. If I can fly, you can too." 3 months after that Sweet 16, Marisol received news. The cancer was in remission. The doctors couldn't completely explain it. The chemotherapy had worked, of course, but there was something more, something that medical tests couldn't measure. Marisol's mother described it this way: "After the Sweet 16, my daughter started to fight. Before, she was just surviving. After, she started fighting to live." Gladys received the news while sewing the 543rd dress for the foundation. When she read the message, she put the needle on the table and cried. Violet came into the workshop and found her crying. She thought something bad had happened, but Gladys looked at her with bright eyes and showed her the phone. "She's in remission, honey. Marisol is in remission." Violet hugged Gladys, and the two cried together. because that's what this foundation does. It doesn't just make dresses. It makes small miracles. It makes hope visible. It makes girls who think they're going to die start to believe they're going to live. Today, as you listen to this story, there's a girl somewhere in America waiting for a dress. Maybe she has a physical disability. Maybe she has a terminal illness. Maybe she's simply from a family so poor that she never thought she could have a sweet 16. But Gladys is in her workshop, with her 1972 sewing machine, with her hands wrinkled from decades of work, with her heart full of stories of girls who danced when everyone said it was impossible, and she's sewing, stitch by stitch, dream by dream, miracle by miracle. The question isn't whether Gladys can keep making dresses. She's 55 years old. Her hands sometimes tremble. Her eyes don't see as well as they used to, but she keeps sewing. The question is, how many Gladyses are there in the world who will never find their Violet? How many people with extraordinary talents are hidden behind cleaning uniforms, behind invisible jobs, behind lives that no one looks at twice? How many dreams are waiting for someone to ask, "What's your favorite song for the first dance?" I know this story was long. I know it took time to listen to it, but I want you to remember something. Every day, in every home, in every office, in every hospital, there are invisible people doing invisible jobs, people that no one sees, people whose stories no one knows, and some of those people can work miracles. They just need someone to give them the chance. Violet was that opportunity for Gladys. Marisol was another. The 543 girls who have received dresses from the foundation. They were 543 more opportunities. But the final question is for you. Is there someone in your life that you've never really looked at? Someone whose story you don't know, someone who could achieve the impossible if only someone believed in them. Are you going to keep walking by, or are you going to stop and ask? Gladys waited 52 years for someone to see her. 52 years, cleaning houses, secretly sewing, guarding her talent like a treasure that no one wanted, until one February night, a girl without arms opened the door for her, and everything changed. 4 designers said, "Impossible." A housekeeper said, "You will dance." And 543 girls later, that housekeeper is still saying the same thing. You will dance, sweetheart. I promise you. And the promises of mothers, even if they aren't blood, they come true. They always come true. Always.